The image of his father reaching out to him and Oscar not actually reaching back or leaning towards his father, I think is very painful to watch. Anybody who's been in a situation where their son or the child may have fallen, the instinctive reaction of a parent is to help them back to their feet and is to put their arm around them. And the picture almost screamed out and said, "Don't help me."
In March, the news media and a politician were on a collision course.
Chris Huhne and his ex-wife are to stand trial charged with intending to pervert the course of justice. It's alleged Mr Huhne, a former Energy Secretary, persuaded Vicky Pryce to take penalty points after he was caught speeding.
Justin Tallis is a veteran of the courtroom scrum.
I got down here and there must have been 50, 60 photographers plus television camera people, and there are also quite a few protesters here.
Chris Huhne and Vicky Pryce, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, and soon in prison.
The original crime was a speeding offence, but the former minister then lied to the police, to his family, and to us. His wife initially backed him up, but after he had had an affair and dumped her, she took her revenge. It was a downfall the British people would relish, and the press had to prepare for it.
I saw if I could come in from the side, I could maybe get a media picture of media here, photographers, lenders, TV camera people, and Chris Huhne walking here. The two slowly got closer together, but because of the protesters and the size of the press pack, the media slowly came to a stop because we couldn't go any further, and Mr Huhne kept walking until...
There's 1,000 emotions that picture and his stern reaction to it elicits, and that's why that picture is very powerful. If you're trying to be provocative, and we are in our hello world, wake up, look at these stories, then that's a very, very powerful image because it's already telling you 1,000 things before you even bothered to read the first 6 words.
Well, I think a good picture encompasses as many elements as the story as possible. So if you look at the picture, you have a camera on the left, which, you know, the story was about a speed camera. You have the police officer in the middle, and, you know, the issue is with the law here. And then you have Mr Huhne with a crooked nose, a politician who's done wrong, on the right-hand side.
You can spend all day waiting to find a picture. You can show your selection to the editor, and you just, you know, say, oh, I'm not happy about this, or I don't think I've got the one image. But that came in, I don't know, say 12:30, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Instantly, you show it to the editor. You know that your job's done for the day.
As a man of faith, as a man who preaches peace and tolerance, it would be completely unbecoming for me to say, Chris Huhne, you completely deserve this. So I won't. Chris Huhne, you completely deserve this.
Jail wasn't the end of it. Both Huhne and Pryce would be caught by long lenses as they saw out their sentences in open prisons. They protested that their privacy had been invaded. The Press Complaints Commission disagreed, and the pair were accused of using the media when it suited them and crying foul when it didn't. In April, terror struck the Boston Marathon, and in its wake came serious questions about social media.
I turned and I had no idea what it was. I mean, you hear a loud explosion like that, it rocked everything. I didn't know if it was fireworks that went off, if it was like, some people were saying, oh, maybe like a an electrical box exploded or something like that, you never think terrorist attack. That's never your first thought.
21-year-old student Dan Lampariello tweeted a picture which alerted many around the world that something terrible had happened in Boston.
I took out my iPhone and just started taking pictures of, there was white smoke just billowing up over the buildings over there, and I just started taking pictures of it. I took one photo, and to tell you the truth, I just turned and ran.
Often the most powerful pictures of terrible events are those which are taken from a distance. If you're up close at the heart of this, the horror is overwhelming. There's all these people there watching a racing event, and there in the background, people are dying and their lives are being changed forever. It's very haunting.
Dan's picture had an electrifying effect on journalists everywhere.
I was in the newsroom, and it was a reasonably ordinary night, and then my Twitter feed lit up like a firework. There's a saying in that when a light goes on, when a signal goes off, you immediately see it, and often that's true with Twitter, and immediately Boston was firing down my timeline and firing through my Twitter, and immediately I knew that there was a story.
Dan's picture appeared to show a mysterious figure on a rooftop. It was just one example that led to feverish speculation online, resulting in many people being wrongly accused. And tragedy would follow.
There's a saying that Twitter is at its best during the 5 minutes or after a disaster, and at its worst for the next 12 hours. And there's some truth in that. An awful lot of people becoming internet detectives. And they started to make their own theories up. They saw a guy with a rucksack, they saw a dark-skinned guy, they saw a guy walking the different direction.
The instinctive reaction, of course, was to racialise this issue, was to say we are looking for brown-skinned bombers, we are looking for ethnic minorities, we're looking for Muslims.
Self-appointed cyber detectives singled out Sunil Tripathi, a 22-year-old student who'd been reported missing before the bombing, even though he had no connection with it and had never been under police suspicion. After his body was found in the Providence River, many believed he had killed himself because he'd been wrongly identified as a terrorist. The news-sharing site Reddit apologised for its role in the online witch hunt, even though nobody could know for sure if the two events were connected.
With social media, you take that snapshot, that moment, you don't know the context of it, you don't know the meaning, but it's already out there and people are consuming it. What I think will be interesting is the consequence of that further down the line, that we now have access to a jungle of information and pictures all the time. And I do think that in the future there will still be a need for a trusted hand holder to take you through, to tell you what you need to know, what's important, this is the context, and get you through the jungle.
Some news events are long planned for, but can still throw up surprising images.
Baroness Thatcher, Britain's longest-serving Prime Minister of the 20th century, passed away this morning following a stroke. There'll be a funeral at St Paul's Cathedral with full military honours.
The funny thing about Margaret Thatcher's funeral was that, in a way, the emotion was quite unexpected. So many images stay in my mind. I was just a couple of feet from the aisle, so I saw the funeral procession go past very, very close. Prince Philip, with a glassy stare ahead of him, just a tiny drop of moisture on the end of his nose. The Queen, bird-like, looking around, very, very observant, taking everything in.
But who would have predicted which pictures would be the most talked about?
For debating policies and legacy, for assessing the impact.
We're all watching it on TV, and halfway through the service, the camera panned round of the people who were in the congregation, and there's George. And someone shouted out, "He looks like he's crying." And so we rewound the video, went back and noticed that he was. We don't do this often at the Times, and that's a grab off moving footage. So the quality's not great, but it's enough to actually show that he is crying. So, and basically that's how we got it. We nicked it off the BBC.
The great thing about that picture is, really? He's crying? Good grief! And you just think, then it's powerful. It becomes a talking point, and you could put that in any newspaper, any magazine, on TV. You could put it anywhere because it's a talking point, because you think, but I didn't think British politicians showed emotions, especially not men. And him? Look, he's crying. That's a talking point.
I'm not altogether surprised that the image made the news because, well, it's quite a thing to see a Chancellor who has to be a fairly unsentimental man with a tear in his eye. I thought was rather good for George Osborne because one has to see him. As a bean counter, that's what Chancellors are supposed to do. But to see him just as caught up as everybody else in the emotion, well, it humanised him for me, and I think for a lot of other people too.
There were others who were more cynical.
Who will win? That's the big question. Well, Olivia Colman is up for a couple. Yeah. If she doesn't win, there'll be tears. Yeah. She's sort of like George Osborne, isn't she? Yeah. Except she's good at something and people like her.
When I saw the picture of George Osborne crying, I was incensed. This is the man who has presided over welfare reforms and cuts which have devastated the lives of people. And I'm not sure if I've ever seen any public remorse for any of those things. However, when Maggie died, he's crying.
Some speculated that it was bad economic news that brought a tear to his eye, but his own account was straightforward.
We did see you weeping at the funeral. Huge amount of coverage of that, of course.
Well, I was caught on camera, so I can't deny that it.
No, but I just want to.
Yes, I welled up a bit because I thought it was a very emotional and moving occasion, and at times overwhelming.
May saw the camera phone used to shock as a propaganda tool. An off-duty soldier was targeted on a South London street. One of his killers wanted to record a justification for their actions and instructed a man on his way to pick up his children from school to take out his smartphone, and all the while holding a bloodied meat cleaver.
The only reason we have killed this man today is because Muslims are dying daily by British soldiers. And this British soldier is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
There is a man in the middle of a very ordinary part of London with blood on his hands and a knife in his hands.
The shocking element for me was that this was something that you would normally associate with Afghanistan or possibly the Middle East, and this was happening in Woolwich.
There's a woman pushing a shopping trolley almost past this guy during part of the footage. The guy who took that picture, I think an awful lot of people put themselves in his place. A man with a knife and blood on his hands tells you to take his picture, you're going to do it.
The sight of somebody not only covered in blood, but audaciously standing in front of somebody who was filming it and talking about politics and talking about a potential justification for that act, I think is something we've never seen anything like that.